credit flows from the banking system are key source for financing the corporate sector. If the banking flows stop, then clearly we saw what happened with the European Union. And if the banks cannot provide funding, and these bonds were one of the main sources of providing funding to the banks, it means there is no transmission mechanism, and the ECB is left without ammunition. So they on purposely targeted purchase of the bonds in a way to decrease the funding costs of the banks. The second very important program is Market Securities Program. This meant that they started purchasing even government securities at the secondary market. Why? Many discussions about these dilemmas, should they do this? The main explanation of the ECB is that they are not breaching the Maastricht criteria for financing the government, but simply they are working with the view of repairing the transmission mechanism because of high correlation that existed between funding costs of the banks and funding costs of the sovereigns. So if the funding cost of the sovereigns increase substantially, it implies also substantial increase also of the banks, and then again the story loop to the real sector through the banking channel. Outright monetary transactions, it's a new program that substituted the securities market program. The main idea is again targeting the government securities market. It is unlimited government bond purchase with conditionality to apply to the European stability mechanism. The main difference between two is the second is unlimited, and in a way it is interpreted by the financial markets that to some extent it may play a role of a lender of last resort because it has unlimited ammunition, if I can say so, to backstopping the banks that need liquidity. However, I already mentioned that the sovereign debt crisis exposed fundamental weaknesses in the European economic governance frameworks, and the second set of measures were aimed at basically correcting the design failures. We had too much monetary union and obviously too little fiscal union and union of other economic, social and other overall macroeconomic policies. So which were the EU tools for strengthening the governance or redesigning the structure of the European Union? The reforms were focused on three areas. First, strengthening the economic policy coordination. Second, fostering fiscal discipline. And third, fostering greater banking integration. What does strengthening economic policy coordination imply? The main measures were aimed at preventing and correcting macroeconomic balances. A new procedure, macroeconomic imbalance procedure, was introduced. There are certain thresholds, benchmarks for external debt, domestic debt, growth of the credits, external weaknesses, and etc., which are monitored on the regular basis by the European institutions, and the countries are asked to gradually fulfill these criteria. Second, the policy reforms plans, which the member state countries plan to introduce, are required to submit to the European institutions and to be discussed ex ante. And there is the requirement, very important, that in the structural reform, special emphasis is devoted to convergence and competitiveness, because we saw that one of the main origins of the crisis was diverse economies, very slow convergence, and inefficient mechanisms to prevent buildup of macroeconomic imbalances. So the second area is fostering the fiscal discipline through stricter budgetary rules, automatic application of corrective measures, emphasis on the preventive stage instead of ex post stage, and more strict application of the correction of the excessive debt ratios in the member state. The last block, or the last main area where the focus was put with a view of redesign, is fostering greater banking integration through enhanced supervisory coordination and unified supervisory regulatory framework. On the right-hand side, I'll just mention the documents which reflect the new vision of the European policymakers, how the new European Union should look. I would mention some of the elements, I don't know whether I have much time, some of the elements which are very important for fostering the fiscal discipline. The six-pack document requires stricter fiscal surveillance and application of the fiscal rules and stricter macroeconomic surveillance through the macroeconomic imbalance procedure. Stricter fiscal surveillance focuses mainly on defining quantitatively what significant deviation from the medium-term objective of the budget balance means, making a stability pact more operational by allowing excessive debt procedures to start even before even if the deficit is below 3%, but the debt is about 60%, which was not the case up to now. Then imposition of the financial transactions in a gradual way throughout the whole procedure, not at the last stage, meaning that there should be corrective mechanisms during the process of during this process, and the stipulation that they can reach 0.5% of GDP, introducing reverse qualified majority voting for most of the sanction, which means higher automaticity for implying some sanctions. Fiscal Compact goes in parallel with the six-pack. They are not contravening each other. It is part of the Treaty on Stability, Coordination and Governance. The main points, main items that I would like to highlight here, which are part of the Fiscal Compact, is the stipulation that the structural deficit should not exceed 0.5% of GDP. There are some exceptions, as always, and we will see how it will work in practice. If member states deviate, then automatic correction mechanisms will be triggered during the process. Balanced budget rule should be enshrined in the national law, and preferably it should be included at the level of constitution. That's the requirement of the Fiscal Pact, and compliance should be also monitored by independent national institutions. Then, European stability mechanisms as one of the new features of the European Union. Basically, it's a move from temporary funds, temporary backstop, to more permanent resolution mechanism. That is, it is interpreted as a firewall against debt crisis. The main features of this fund is providing loans to the euro area member states which are facing financial difficulties, intervening in the debt market, primary as well as secondary market, act on the basis of a precautionary program, extending precautionary credit line, and this is very important because this can act in advance, stopping the disturbances on the financial markets and calming the expectations and perceptions, and provide loans to governments for the purpose of recapitalization of the financial institutions. So that's very important. It's not that they will provide just loans to governments, but also loans aimed for recapitalization. And when the single supervisory mechanism is in place, then they will be able directly to provide funds to the financial institutions across the euro area. European Banking Union, one of the pillars of the reform, single supervisory mechanism is just the first step on the long march in this area. What is the motivation? Basically, an integrated banking system requires integrated prudential oversight. European monetary union system of unity in a monetary policy, but national plurality in financial policy showed unsustainable. So goal is to safeguard financial stability through the following aspects: reducing fragmentation of the financial markets, weakening the loop of the sovereign and bank borrowing cost, and thus enhancing the monetary policy transmission. What we are talking when we talk about the financial fragmentation, it can be very clearly seen from these charts which are taken from the IMF discussion paper. On the right side, the red line and the gray line show the credit default spreads of the banks and of the sovereigns, and clear high correlation between the funding cost is seen here. On the left side, we can see, on the contrary, the weak link between the policy rate and the rates in particular economies. Not that the correlation is weak, but also there is a high divergence that I mentioned before among the European countries. So, strong link between funding costs of the banks and sovereigns, but weak links with the main policy interest rate, which was really a problem, and this was one of the main causes why the European Central Bank undertook bold and unconventional measures to repair basically the transmission mechanism. Single supervisory mechanisms, some of the main features. Supervisory tasks and powers are given to the European Central Bank, but still the care is taken that the separation from the monetary policy exists, so that sometimes where are trade-offs, it does not negatively affect financial stability, applies to the all European member states, and is open for non-Euro area members. The idea is that all banks are covered, but the process will go gradually with a gradual build-up of capacities of the new institution. However, there are two discussions, at least now in the pipelines, possible projects about single resolution mechanism and single backstops for the European Union member states and single deposit safety nets, but there are still an idea, still discussion, and there are no concrete measures up to now. To finalize, to approach the end of my presentation, I would say that the Euro crisis led to profound governance reforms, but now the question is, are we there yet? I think many, not just I, but I think overall perception is that many challenges are still ahead. For example, the creation of the European Stability Mechanism supports the overall structure of the monetary union, but the risks of moral hazard require stringent conditionality. And also one issue is the limited capacity of the European Stability Mechanism, and which implies that it cannot be treated by the participants at the financial markets fully as a lender of last resort and prevent panic and self-fulfilling liquidity crisis, which basically happens. So there are still a lot of things about design of this instrument. Then reforms on the fiscal governance are very comprehensive and profound, but there is a room from national administrative and political discretion, higher complexity which might imply problems in monitoring and implementation. Strict observance, implementation and ownership are the key for not replicating the same flaws of the former fiscal setup. Full-fledged fiscal union, one lively debate with lots of pros and cons coming to the fore. About the strengthening of the economic policy coordination, that's a prerequisite for preventing macroeconomic imbalances and higher convergence, but the treaty itself seems vague on the implementation instruments. Banking union, yes, that's indispensable for breaking the banking and sovereign vicious circle. However, if left alone without unified crisis resolution mechanisms and appropriate backstop, the full benefits will not be reaped. So, for the future of the euro area, the bold responses of the policymakers clearly removed the tail risk of the eurozone breakup, but the euro area must continue fixing structural and institutional deficiencies that basically exacerbated and in a way led to this crisis. Main focus, besides enhancing fiscal, macroeconomic and financial governance, should be put on the competitiveness of the economies, because we saw that even high growths which are not based on stable basis are not there to last. The excesses, the buildup of excesses which are not based on sustainable basis will have to be corrected sooner or later. So the crisis proved that the smooth functioning of a monetary union requires economic competitiveness, fiscal stability, and stability of the financial system. And let me close my speaking just with quoting Paul de Groff. I find this very interesting. In 1999, I compared the Eurozone to a beautiful villa in which Europeans were ready to enter. Yet it was a villa that did not have a roof. As long as the weather was fine, we would like to have settled in the villa. We would regret it when the weather turned ugly. This was said in 1999. Seems a roof is still missing, but at least construction is ongoing. Thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you.